Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. A Pizza by Sassafras. I worked overnights at an isolated gas station the summer after I graduated high school, way back in the late 1980s. This gas station had hot pizza in a clear case, and the case opened from the back. You'd open the case, pull out a slice, put it on a plate, and then hand it to the customer. One day when I came in at 11 p.m., which was 3 or 4 feet down the counter from the register, I had one piece for dinner, then went about working my shift, which consisted of standing at the register waiting for people to wander in. It was a slow shift. I had only had 4 or 5 customers in a couple of hours. Not a busy shift by any means, and most just wanting lottery tickets or to pay for gas or grab a pop. By 1 a.m., there was no one in the store or at the pumps, so I got started neatening up the store, always in eyesight of the front counter, the register, the lotto machine, and the pizza case. And no one came in for the hour I was schlepping around trying to make it look like I was working. Figuring the pizza was pretty well dried out by then, I went over to throw it out. I opened the case, and there was just an empty tray. Somehow, 2 slices of probably 5-hour-old pizza disappeared. The only way to get in the pizza case was to get behind the counter, and to do that, you had to punch in a code, and then the door would buzz really loud and unlock. In other words, you couldn't just reach around the counter and get to the pizza. I scratched my head and spent the rest of my shift nervously worrying that there was some rando pizza-eating killer hiding somewhere in the store. And when a sheriff's deputy came in at around 4 a.m., I asked him to check the building for any intruders. He didn't find anyone. Before leaving at the end of my shift, I wrote a note to my boss detailing what happened and then went home. When I came in for my next shift, he was there waiting and told me he reviewed the video, and there were cameras aimed at the front counter, door, and over the store, and he played it back for me. It showed me ringing out a customer, then going and neatening up the shelves. Meanwhile, on the front counter camera, a couple of minutes after I left the counter area, the camera got shaky and then went to static for 30 seconds or so. When it came back on, the pizza was no longer in the case. It never happened again while I worked there, which was for about another 6 months or so, and we never did figure out what happened. Not So Convenient. Submitted by Whiskey Tango Foxtrot Guy. When I got out of the service, 5 years in E4 if you need to know, I was going to college and also working nights at an all-night gas station in a town right on the border of Indiana and Kentucky. On the good side, Indiana. I was 23 at the time of this, and it's still a mom-and-pop place and one of the only places that stays open all night unless you go to the Moto Mart about 15 miles away or so. We mostly just sell gas, but we have a small cooler with pop and snacks and shit like that. But it's not a big place where you can walk down aisles. It's basically walk in, pay, the 2 cooler doors are just to the right and behind the cash register, some racks of chips and that sort of thing on the side. We have an employee bathroom and another one around the side for customers. The key to that is attached to a 15-pound weight from a workout bench. It kind of deters wise asses from trying to run off with it. I liked working overnights because it gave me time to do my schoolwork, and honestly, I'm kind of a loner. The quiet was awesome, and people stopping in was pretty rare. During the day, the place would get slammed as we weren't too far from a campground and a lake. But at nighttime, it was quiet, and I could go outside for a smoke or whatever whenever I wanted to. This one night, I was done with school for the summer and thinking about how I wanted to move to California after I get my associate's degree in criminal justice. My best friend lived out there and was working as a law enforcement officer, and he kept telling me that I would get hired with my military background and the degree would be a bonus. I was actually talking to him on the phone when this incident went down, and I'm talking a wall-mounted phone. It was 1992, and cell phones were those giant bag phones at the time, and I sure as shit didn't make enough money for one of those. So my buddy called me around 2 a.m. as he was on West Coast time. He was telling me all about his job, and that's when I looked up to see a car pull over and 2 guys get out. They both came over to the door and walked in, and one immediately asked if we had a restroom. I said, yeah, sure thing. Yanked up the key and wait, and he kind of looked at it for a minute, but then took it. As he left, the other guy started making small talk and looking at items in the cooler. Then I saw the other guy get back in his car and start it up. So I jumped over to the counter, but all he did was drive around the side of the building and then stopped again. He got out, went into the bathroom. I just kind of shook my head and went back inside. False alarm, I guess. The other guy never said a thing. He just bought a Coke and a bag of Peerless chips and asked if he could eat inside. I said, go for it. And he started talking about baseball or something. Maybe 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the glass window behind me, and it was the guy motioning to his buddy. The guy looked at me and said, hey, thanks for the food and conversation. I'm going to go use the restroom too. He walked outside, and I saw the first guy hand him the weight with the bathroom key, but it was kind of below the window. I just saw the motion of him handing it over. First guy gets back into his car and sits there. I guess he was playing with the radio or whatever. About 5 minutes after that, the second guy came out of the bathroom, jumped in the car, and they took off like bats out of hell. I was super pissed thinking that they had run off with the key. I told my buddy on the phone that I'd call him back and ran outside to see the weight and the key on the pavement next to the station. In the darkness, all of it looked kind of wet, but when I bent down to get a closer look, I could see that it was wet with something other than water. At first I figured it was just water, so I went back inside to get some paper towels and Windex just to be sure. But when I went back out and started wiping it down, I realized it wasn't water or piss. It was blood. I got a sick feeling in my gut and went back inside. I got a flashlight and our spare restroom key. I wasn't touching that other one. No fucking way. So I started shining the light on the side of the building, and there were bloody smears on the door of the bathroom and the door handle. I walked over to the door and noticed it was ajar. Something was sticking out of the bottom of it. I used a paper towel in my hand to open the door and got the shock of my life. As I shone the flashlight in, I saw a very dead and very bloody German Shepherd on the floor. Its paw was what was keeping the door open. I backed up, ran back inside of the shop, called the sheriffs and told them something was going on and there was a dead dog in my restroom and 2 guys had just put it there. They came out about a half hour later and went to check things out. And one of them went in and pulled the carcass out with some gloves. And that's when we all saw something so gross I almost puked. There were 2 condoms stuck to the fur of the back of the dog. These 2 psychos had taken turns fucking a German Shepherd in the restroom of my gas station. I have no idea if the dog was alive or what, but it certainly was dead after all this happened. I am a huge dog lover. I am a huge fan of animals. And I'm not going to lie, after I almost puked, I kind of wanted to cry. I gave the sheriffs my description of the guys and their car. I mean, I really hadn't paid much attention to that, but I did my best. They put the dog in a bag and then just threw it in the dumpster out back. I called the owners of the gas station and was telling them what was going on, and they said to just lock the bathroom, they'd have someone come out and clean it the next day, and that I didn't have to do that. I figured they would rush right down with something like this happening so strange. But, oh well, I'm not going to make decisions for everybody. But I will say this. I'm really glad I never saw those guys again. I mean, I have no idea who they were, no idea where they went, no idea where they came from. But for the next 8 months I worked there, before heading to California, they never came back. Drugs by Van Morieux. At about 3 a.m. one night, I had a woman come in. Insanely skinny, blonde, thinning hair, and wearing what looked like pajamas. Nothing really out of the ordinary about her, so I only really glanced up as I buzzed her in, called out a quick greeting, and then went back to cleaning. After about 2 to 3 minutes, though, I looked up, and she was standing about 4 feet from the counter, just staring at me. Completely blank, unwavering kind of stare. It startled me a little, and I asked her if I could help her with anything, but she didn't reply and just continued to stare. She eventually began looking around the store, but she didn't take her eyes off me the entire time. even walking backwards at some points so she wouldn't break eye contact with me. After she grabbed some things, she came back to the counter, still staring but also muttering something under her breath. It was really hard to hear what she was saying, but I managed to make out a brand of smokes after getting her to repeat it several times. I got them for her, scanned all of her things, and she paid, eyes still locked on me and showing no emotion at all. It was getting pretty unnerving at that point, and I was just looking forward to getting her out the door. As I was handing over her change, though, she suddenly smiled, which would ease the tension if she didn't also start to laugh, and it was this really raspy laugh, kind of a cross between that croaky noise the Grudge makes and a typical witch's laugh. Kind of a cackle, I guess. I tried not to react too much and told her to have a good night, and then took a few steps back from the counter. We were both kind of frozen, her just laughing, and me having no idea what to do. She continued her cackling and stared at me for a few minutes, and then just left, walking backwards again so she could keep looking at me. I felt really freaked out at that point, but figured she was probably just drunk or high or just had some other stuff going on. She was outside at that point and had wandered off, so I just went back to cleaning and tried to shake off the whole moment. About an hour later, I was out in the store mopping, and I heard a thud against the window. The whole front of our store is just glass panels, and the noise came from right beside me. I looked up, and this damn woman was back. Her hand was pushed up against the window, and she was laughing again. I could just hear it as I was so close to the door. I must have really jumped at the sight of her because she seemed to get a kick out of it, laughing even more, and smacking her hands on the window repeatedly. I thought, bugger the mopping, and went back behind the counter. I ended up staying in the back room where all of our security screens are and waiting for her to leave. It took about 45 minutes for her to clear off, and the whole time just banging on the window, and I assumed still laughing. I'm really glad our doors are locked overnight because I wouldn't have liked to have been on the same side of the counter as her. I'm not sure what her deal was, and I doubt she posed any real threat, but dang, it really freaked me out. I've seen her a few times since then, just wandering on the footpath outside, but she has never come in or hung around again. And now a word from our sponsor. If you're a serious comic book collector, just starting out your collection, or maybe you're just a casual reader, then you have to check out 3D Comics in Lancaster, New York. From graded comics, custom art lithographs, limited edition prints and statues, 3D Comics is a must-see for the serious enthusiast, but the laid-back atmosphere is perfect for anyone with a love for comic books and more. They also specialize in custom art Funko Pops, taking regular Funko Pops and having a team of artists do original art on the boxes. Each comes with a certificate of authenticity. Located at 32 Central Ave in the heart of the village of historic Lancaster, New York, 3D Comics is open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 6, with special appointments available on Sundays. Find them online at 3dcomicsandmore.com. That's the number 3, the letter D, comicsandmore.com. And if you prefer to shop online, owner Joel Sharmani has tons of items available on eBay. Find a quick link to that on the shop's homepage. They also feature in-store appearances from today's hottest artists, special offers, and every Wednesday is New Comic Book Day. Give them a call at 716-860-7837, visit them online right now at 3dcomicsandmore.com, or better yet, just stop on in. But no matter where you are around the round world, 3D Comics is your destination for the best in comic books, custom art, and beyond. 3D Comics and More. That's the number 3, the letter D, comicsandmore.com. Tell them Uncle Josh sent you. Gas Station Fire, submitted by Gopher1. Yo, Uncle Jay. I hope you read this even though it's not that long. In the mid-90s, I took a job working at the only gas station in my town. There were plenty of places like Wawa and Sheetz out in the suburbs, but downtown in the city, we were the only game. No coffee, no food, nothing other than gas. And we weren't in the best part of town either. After 8 p.m., all transactions either happened at the pumps via a card or via a sliding drawer at our office. The place had been robbed so many times that the owner finally put in bulletproof window trimmings and the sliding drawer. It seemed to work. That and the low cash on hand policy that required us to take bills and immediately drop them into a safe. No one else but the chief had access to that. We never had more than $50 in loose bills and change, and that pissed off more than a few customers coming in with 50s or whatever. It was a boring job. We had a little black and white TV that got like 3 channels, and I just spent my summer nights sitting in a room waiting for the local nightlife and winos to come in for gas, or try to talk to me through the glass and beg for change for the bus. That last one always killed me, and I used that in air quotes. Change for the bus. I mean, freaking buses weren't even running that late. Anyway, one night I was just sitting there doing my thing, watching this stupid black and white TV, when a guy pulled in an SUV. He got out, used his card at the pump, and started to fuel up. But he was also smoking a cigarette, and this is something that most gas station attendants kind of frown on. But not having to be able to leave my post, I kind of just banged on the window to get his attention. He looked over at me, smiled and waved, and I kind of gave him the motion of, "Don't do that," waving my finger and pointing at my face where he would be holding his cigarette. He just nodded at me and laughed, and I could tell he was probably a little bit more than saucy from one of the places up the street. He finished fueling up and started to drive off, and I thought nothing more of it. But when I looked, I didn't realize that he had just dropped the pump onto the ground, and some of the gas had spilled out of the nozzle. Also unbeknownst to me at that point, he had thrown his cigarette down on the ground, not too far from where the nozzle was, and it doesn't take a genius to figure out what happened next. The cigarette hit the fuel that had been spilled on the ground, and it very quickly sped right across the hose of the pump, and the next thing I knew, in a flash, the entire pump was engulfed in flames. I mean, I nearly peed my pants. I immediately called 911 on the office phone, but in my terror, I couldn't remember how to actually open our door to get out. We had a little code for it. And I know that sounds stupid, but in a situation like that, sometimes you just lose all sense of reality and what you really need to be doing. The fire spread so fast, it turned out that my cheap-ass boss hadn't updated the sprinkler system, so sprinklers went off on a different pump, not the one that was on fire. So there I was, panicking, trying to open a stupid door as I watched these flames get higher and higher, and I just wanted to run away. And all the while, someone from 911 was still on the phone yelling at me to remain calm, and I'm watching everything just go up. Finally, I screamed into the phone our address, said that the gas station was on fire, gave them my name, and then got back to my senses and opened the door, and then just ran up the street. I mean, there really wasn't much else I could do at that point. Thank God nothing exploded, but the fire quickly spread to the other pumps, and about 10 minutes later the fire department showed up and started doing their thing and got everything put out. The police obviously showed up, as did my boss, and I gave them my entire story of what happened, probably with way too many curse words. I was so angry with that guy who nearly just killed me because he felt like he had to have a cigarette while he was getting gas. The place ended up getting shut down, and my boss got into a heap of trouble for not having proper fire extinguishers for the gas pumps, and I took a job as a bartender not too far from that place. Eventually I moved away, but I did go back recently and went to see some friends, and we drove by the lot there on the corner. But there's nothing there except an empty lot with those big pieces of concrete just blocking people from coming in, and chains between them. I guess that neighborhood finally had their fill of that gas station. No pun intended. Opening shift, submitted by That's Not Me. First off, I'm not crazy. Saw your tweet and thought I'd share. I've only told my boyfriend and my boss about this, and I'm sure everyone else would think I was nuts if I told them. When I was in my mid-20s, I'd been promoted from a stock person, checkout person, to assistant manager of a convenience store in my town. The store was in an odd area of town that didn't have any other businesses around except for a Burger King maybe 100 yards up the way, and a gas station maybe half-mile in the other direction. It was a good job, and seeing as how I had dropped out of school, I couldn't complain. I mean, nothing to do with the story, but I did eventually get my GED and now have 2 degrees and am teaching middle school. I guess we get to where we're going no matter what, right? My job was to open the store at 5 a.m. every morning. We really didn't open at 5. We opened the doors at 6, but there were things to do to get ready for that day. I'm not going to bore anybody with all that stuff. But the day when all this started, it was as normal as ever. I got up, had coffee, showered, and was at the store at 4:45. Right away when I unlocked the back security door, I noticed something was off. A smell like sewage was coming from our floor, and not the back dump room where we threw garbage. I walked all around the store, checked the entire walk-in, and there was nothing there out of the ordinary. But the smell stayed in the air for about another 20 minutes, and then it kind of just went away. Not knowing what else to do, I just shrugged my shoulders, got ready for the guy who delivered our salads and sandwiches, and got on with the day. Next day, same thing. Funny smell, but this time I noticed some other things that were off. Like when I opened the back door, a bunch of things were stacked up against it. A bucket, a mop, a garbage can, stuff that couldn't possibly have been there left by the night crew. They left by the same door, and there's no way they could have stacked all of these things up right against the door and then made an exit. And for anyone asking, the front door locks permanently. You can't go out and lock it from the outside. When you lock it from the inside, that's it. I got on with things, but I did call my manager and let him know about it. He immediately said it just must be a prank from John and Kirk, the night guys. During a slow part of my day, I called Kirk and asked him about it, but he was super earnest and said they didn't do anything like that. They just left. It went on. Every morning there was a weird smell, and things were moving around on their own. Now it wasn't stuff piled up against the door. In aisle 2, we kept cleaning stuff like dish soap, car supplies, trees on the mirror, all that kind of thing. One morning I came in, and there was a stack of Comet piled up, can on top of can, almost as tall as me, just standing there in the middle of the aisle, and when I took them down, the smell went away. About a day or so later, the food service guy came in and noticed the smell and asked me about it. I really didn't know what to say, but he kept bringing it up for the next week every time he made his delivery. I finally told my boss that he needed to come down there in the morning with me to see what I was talking about, and he did. When he smelled it, he went back to our dump room, and then to our employee restroom. He didn't find anything, of course, and he even went up on the roof. But eventually, like always, the smell went away, and he said, "Oh well, maybe there's something wrong with the sewer system," and he would call someone about it. But that's all he did. I put up with it. But a couple of weeks later, the really strange stuff started, as if the cans stacked up like the books in Ghostbusters wasn't weird enough. One morning when I went in, all of the binders and stuff on a shelf from the manager's office were stuffed into our dairy cooler. Just jammed in, so when I opened the door, all of it fell out. I told my manager about that, and we both looked at the security cameras and found nothing wrong. 1 minute, all was fine in the office. The next minute, everything disappeared and reappeared in the cooler door. I should point out that we also looked at the cameras when everything else was happening too, but it was always the same thing. Nothing was wrong, and then suddenly things were screwy. My manager really gave the closing guys the business about all this, but they earnestly denied doing anything other than just closing the place down. And the cameras caught them doing their thing, and that's it. The CCTV system was locked in a cabinet, and only my manager had a key to that. He even went so far as to take shifts with the guys at night to make sure they were on the up and up. But strange things happened on the nights after he locked up too. Finally, what broke the camel's back, so to say, I came in at my usual time. By this point, I had started smoking again after I had quit for a couple of years, and I was in the office putting the next week's schedule together, when I heard this gurgling noise coming from the dump room. I thought, maybe something's backing up in the drain and that's what's causing the smell. So I leaned back in my chair, and what happened next was the scariest thing I have ever seen. Our mop bucket came rolling by on its own and stopped right in the doorway of the office. The mop that was in the bucket was just standing there, and it sort of leaned towards me like there was an invisible person holding on to it and pointing it over at me. Then it went back up straight, and the bucket rolled away and went through the door that led to the store. No screaming, no freakout. I was just paralyzed with fear. Shaking, I lit a cigarette, slowly got up, and went out the back door to wait for the delivery guy. I remember wanting to cry, but shortly the guy showed up and asked if I was okay, and I told him everything. He kind of looked at me for a minute and then said, "Look, I don't want to creep you out any more than you are, but I've driven by here on my way home from some night spots well past closing, and I've seen the lights flicking on and off in this place. One time I even pulled into the parking lot, and I swear I saw a dark shape like a mist or a cloud or something, I don't know, moving around inside. I asked him if he had ever talked to my manager about it, and he said, hell no, I don't want a trip to the booby hatch. After talking for another few minutes, we both went inside, and sure enough, the mop bucket was there in the store, propped up against a cooler door. I called my manager, delivery guy did his thing, and my manager came in right away. He looked at the camera tapes and saw the whole thing this time, the mop bucket moving all on its own. He told me he was going to send it to Unsolved Mysteries, but I don't know if he ever did that, as I finally quit that job. I moved away, went to school, and took a job at a movie theater through my college days, as I liked being around other people and not being alone in a store anymore. A few years back, I heard that my old manager passed away, and I reached out via a website that had the announcement of his death, and it was a page that you could leave a comment. I paid my condolences, and one of the guys on the night shift when we worked there tracked me down, and we talked about things. He said after I left, all the crazy stuff stopped, but he knew that my manager's family had a VHS tape of the mop bucket moving around on its own. Part of me wants to see it again, but part of me also wants to just keep the past in the past. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you've got a true scary story you'd like to hear narrated on this channel, send it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Thanks for everyone who saw my message on Twitter, because we got some really cool submissions, and I love reading the stuff that you guys send me, knowing that it's original content right here. How can you find me on Twitter? Hey, you can follow me on all of my social media outlets. Links to that are in the description below. If you'd like to take things a step further, find my Patreon link in the description below, and think about making a donation. Every little bit helps in this time of craziness with COVID-19. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and I will be sure to get back to anyone who leaves a comment as fast as I can. I hope everyone is well out there, and be excellent to each other during this crazy, crazy time. Until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.